Got a great topic for discussion today. In fact, it's so great that 3 and Out's going to have to wait. Let's get right to it. A brand new book comparing rich black athletes to slaves has gotten people talking all over the country. There was a time when 40 acres and a mule was the price black slaves sought as restitution for their forced servitude at the hands of white masters. But today, for the superior black athlete, that payment has swelled into millions of dollars, although the money comes without the important commodity of power. And the black slave, white owner mentality has remained intact. That is the argument at the core of William C. Rhoden's critically acclaimed new book, $40 Million Slaves, which postulates that not only is the ultra-rich black athlete still a slave beholden to white ownership, but that many of these slaves have willingly remained on the plantation. Joining me right now to talk about the book is the author, William C. Rhoden, who's been a sports columnist at the New York Times for more than 2 decades, and Armstrong Williams, the host of the television show The Right Side and a guest columnist for USA Today. Also, Dr. Leonard Moore, the author of 7 books on race, including African-American racial identity in sports, and an associate professor of history and African-American studies at Louisiana State University. And Joel Mowbray, an award-winning investigative journalist and a syndicated columnist. Please give my panel a round of applause, everybody. Now, appreciate you being on the show, Mr. William C. Rhoden. Had to go to you first. I've known you for years, and I have to say I cannot believe the title. I was stunned. $40 million slaves. I mean, talk about that title. Where did that title come from?
That's a great starting point. That's great. The title actually comes from Larry Johnson. Mm-hmm. You know Larry Johnson?
Yes, I do. Formerly of the New York Knicks.
Well, remember in 1999 when the Knicks were in the NBA championship, and Larry was boycotting the media, and they were fine. So fine said, okay, you all want me to talk? I'm going to talk. So he commenced to blast the media and all that. But one of the things he said is that the only people I care about are those brothers on the court. He pointed to the Knicks. He said, we're rebellious slaves. We're a bunch of rebellious slaves. So, of course, the next day, he was just completely massacred in the media. Well, a year later, they were playing a game. The Knicks were playing a game in Los Angeles against the Clippers.
Against the Clippers, yes.
Against the Clippers. And so during timeout, as they walked to the bench, this white fan stood up behind the Knicks bench, and he said, Johnson, you're nothing but a $40 million slave. And I thought that the anecdote was interesting for 2 reasons. A, that this fan remembered that for a whole season, and B, that Larry Johnson chose that particular metaphor to try to describe to the media exactly how he felt. You know, that particular myth. So I want that to begin the beginning of a dialogue.
And that dialogue is what? Because you started you started something here. You know that. Well, you know that, Bill. I've known you for years, and I'm telling you right now, I was shocked by the title because I'm saying to myself, people say, you're talking about slaves and mentioning it in the same breath as multi-million-dollar athletes.
But this is a problem, though. See, this is the first problem. You cannot equate, as soon as you begin to equate money with slavery, you're wrong. I mean, you're wrong because it's a condition. There were brothers, and I went all the way on the plantation. I've been doing it for 8 years. I went all the way on the plantation. There were slaves, there were jockeys who were making lots of money. Slave jockeys. There was a brother named Charles
1700s and 1800s?
Oh, man, there was a brother named Charles Stewart who was a trainer. We're talking about 1810. This brother was a trainer. He had his owners, he was in charge of his owner's stables. At a time when black people weren't supposed to leave state without a pass, this guy had his runners. And you know what? He was making so much money, he had to hire an agent because he was making so much money. But guess what? Charles Stewart was a slave. He was sold 3 or 4 times. Only difference is he could negotiate the terms of his.
But getting back to your point, you're saying money shouldn't be associated with slavery. Is that what you're saying?
Money had nothing to do with the condition. It's the condition of slavery, not necessarily how much money you have.
All right, let me go to Armstrong Williams. You sit right next to him. What are your thoughts as you hear this, especially when he says you shouldn't identify money with slavery? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's inseparable. You know, so many people play off slavery and human slavery and the wretchedness of that. You know, in slavery, human beings, American blacks, did not have a choice. They were forced into in this kind of behavior, dehumanized, and even though the founders realized it was wrong. athletes make a choice. Many young people spend their lives, their childhoods, preparing, wanting to be in the NBA, wanting to be in the NFL, wanting to be superstar athletes. They may not choose the right behavior. They may not have, in some instances, the right value system, but they're free. And many of them go back and empower their families, empower their communities, and they don't squander their money and their resources. I think what Mr. Roden is talking about here is something that we should talk about, is a value system that's like it. But there is no way in 2006 that you can equate athletes with slavery. There's just no comparison.
Let me bring the doctor in here. Go ahead, Doc. He said, you heard what Armstrong Williams said. There's no way that you can basically relate slavery to the modern day athlete. Your thoughts? He's talking, William C. Roden's talking about a slave's mentality. What are your thoughts, sir?
I agree with Roden. I want to thank Roden for writing the piece. I think what we need to realize is that whenever you're not free to speak your mind, whenever the money comes attached with handcuffs, then I believe that you are a slave. I think many African-American athletes have been taught to believe that they are supposed to focus on anything but their particular sport. And I believe that if brothers start to become conscious, start to become political, start to become racially conscious, then I think the money will be cut off.
Hold on, Doc.
I agree with Roden.
But hold on, Doc. How about white America out there? And I'll bring you in a second, Joe. But how about white America who's sitting out there looking at it and saying to themselves, what are you talking about handcuffs? What kind of handcuffs are you talking about? We're paying these guys multi-million dollars. They've got a lot of freedom that a lot of us don't enjoy because they're not making that money. I want you to elaborate on that, Doc. What are you talking about handcuffs?
I don't think they have any freedom whatsoever. A lot of them have white handlers. A lot of them have white agents, white financial planners. When's the last time you seen an African-American athlete really put some money into the African-American community? You know, they buy rim shops, restaurants, clubs, and jewelry. But when's the last time you seen an African-American athlete buy a school, endow a university, and things of that nature? Those are the things we're talking about. They need to start building institutions. But what we find is that a lot of these brothers are scared. They have no testicular fortitude when it comes to racial or social issues. And as a result, the money just stays within a tightly knit circle, and the black community gets no benefit whatsoever from this black athletic prowess.
All right, Joe Mowbray, I'm going to bring you in. What are your thoughts?
I'm stunned. First off, look, Professor Moore talks about the fact that you have white handlers, white money managers. All that's true, but they're all chosen by the black athletes. It's not that black athletes are told you have to have this person as your agent, you have to have this person as your financial planner.
Yes, they are.
And besides, why are we holding black athletes to a different standard than we are white athletes? The fact is, black and white athletes, you have some who flame out, who get all this money, and they end up either in bankruptcy or with a middling life thereafter, and then you have others who go on to succeed. Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, just to name a few. And so I think that we have to look at this and say, look, we have to have the same standard on black athletes and white athletes. And there is progress being made in terms of having black executives, black coaches. But look, more progress needs to be made, no doubt about it. But the idea that they're slaves, come on, that's preposterous.
All right, let me go back to William C. Roden. You heard him. You heard what he said.
Well, since this is my party, let me define the invitation.
Okay.
You know, let me tell you what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that black athletes are exploited. Let's get that straight now. I'm not saying that. We're beyond that.
Yes.
What I'm saying, in fact, on the contrary, is that we've got so much potential power now, right? We got so much potential power. The question now is, how are you going to use it? And in terms of the individual, right now, a lot of brothers, we know them, do some good things individually. They all have some nice foundations, okay? Mm-hmm. But the magnitude of the problems facing our community are much greater than any one foundation's ability to solve it. Mm-hmm. So what I'm calling for now is that we need to get back to teamwork. Mm-hmm. We need to do more collaborative
And how do you expect to accomplish that by calling them slaves?
You know, well, it refers to a condition. If you've got a lot of power and you refuse to use it, the professor said that, well, a lot of guys, nobody makes them do it. Well, there's a chapter I deal with in the book called The Conveyor Belt. And what the conveyor belt is, and it starts when you're in 4th, 5th grade. You're on this conveyor belt that will eventually lead you to the NBA, whatever. But on that conveyor belt, you learn really quickly where the power is. You learn that basically white men and women, predominantly white men, control the belt. They control the levers. They're the bankers. They're the ones who are going to set you up going to getting your scholarship. And by the time you get to be in college and NFL, you already are surrounded by a cadre of usually mostly white. The person who's going to sell you your house, who's going to sell you your car, the person going. You find out if you want big things to happen. Okay, big things to happen. You may want Stephen A. Smith to write your book, right? But if you go into William Morris, whatever, they're going to say, well, I think, we got the guy. Everything's in place. Normally, and all you got to do, Steve, and you know this, man, at 5 o'clock now, you go to every major newspaper in the country, minus the New York Times.
No, I know this.
And you go to Daily News, You go and you look around and find out who's calling the shots.
Let me tell you the problem I have with the professor. You see, we are in a place where the thing that Martin Luther King dreamed about, where a man and a woman would get to the place where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Are you kidding me? You really think that's true?
Well, that's where we're close to there. But let me say, I think it is slowly.
There's a horseshoes.
Listen, if I may finish.
Go ahead.
I think it is so unfair to say to an athlete, because they are black, that they have to conform to a certain mentality. They've got to do a certain thing for the same community. That's not freedom. That is a new form of racism. And what the professors advocating is the new racism.
That's ridiculous.
It is. It's racism because you're only doing it because they're black. And because they're black, you feel they should be accountable in ways that other people are not. And that is wrong.
Dr. Moore, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Moore. Hold on, Joe. Go ahead, Dr. Moore. Go ahead and respond to that.
The scripture says, to whom much is given, much is required.
It didn't mention color.
Imagine if Reggie Bush said, I'm not going to play for the Saints until the levees are fixed. Imagine if LeBron James said, I'm not going to re-sign with the Cavaliers until they fix that atrocious school system. These are the kind of things that athletes need to speak out upon. That's what we're talking about.
It's a human condition. All decent people should speak out against this.
Hold on. Joe, hold on.
Problems?
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, first up, earlier I was responding to the professor's comments. I think the book is well written. The book itself is less inflammatory than the title itself. I think people should.
Well, we're not debating whether or not it's well written. We know that.
Fine. Look, here's the point. The point is the institutions that have been built up, as he calls the conveyor belt, yes, they're white because that's the historical legacy. Much like you had white segregated neighborhoods that only over time, and it takes time. This thing will take time. It was 1988 when you had a black quarterback win the Super Bowl. That was a big deal. And the fact that it was a big deal in 1988, that should be a bit problematic. Art Shell was hired in 1989, and from the time he left in 1994, there were only 4 other black coaches hired until 2002. Since 2002, you've had 3 more. And did you know of the 8 NFL black head coaches we've ever had, 7 of them have been to the playoffs. That's 87.5%. And in more than half the seasons coached by black head coaches, the teams have made the playoffs. So if you have a black head coach historically, you have a better than 50-50 odds in any given season to get to the playoffs. That's a record no white head coaches as a group could match because only the best black head coaches got through. Partly the Rooney Rule, partly other things, but it's changing, and it takes time. We have to have patience.
Joe, you're on Quite Frankly. Don't think for one second I'm going to let you get away with that. I'll be right back with you in a minute. Stephen A. Smith, Quite Frankly, I'm in the house talking about the black athletes and whether or not they're slaves. William C. Road is starting some trouble up in the house. We're going to get into Michael Jordan and, of course, Tiger Woods when we come back. I'm not going anywhere. Stephen A. Smith in the house. Quite Frankly, I'll holler at you in a minute.